Oh, recording. To our webinar with Amanda Milliken. You probably can't see me because I don't have I've got a screen blockage on my camera for some reason. But anyway, that's not important. The most important thing is to see Amanda. So we've got about 54 people signed on already. At this point, I'll turn it over to Amanda. Go ahead, Amanda.
Okay, give me a second. I'm looking up these questions that you sent.
Oh, okay.
So I can answer the questions if I need to do. It'll only take me a second. I think it'll only take me a minute. Let me see, Rose. Questions, here we go. Okay. I always considered it a slightly odd topic for me to be asked to cover about raising puppies and so forth and getting them ready, choosing them, that kind of thing, because I feel like I know more about the later stages, but that's okay. I'm happy to talk about the pups. I've been raising border collies for a long time. I really started with our first dog about 40 years ago, and my sister Kathy got a bitch from Tennessee from Bill Wyatt called Meg, who was a foundation bitch for me. She became the mother of Hazel, who was a Hall of Fame dog for me, and goes back to every pedigree I've got, right? So I was very lucky with her. And it was a funny thing because people ask, you always take a chance when you go out and do a breed. And I took a chance on a dog whose style I liked, whose speed and athleticism I liked. And it was Linda Verna's dog. What was his name? Anyway, it was so long ago. It didn't really matter. But I liked that dog. And he was just run by a novice. And I bred to him and produced a great breed that included Hazel, Pat Buckley's Bart, and a bunch of other ones. There were lots of those around. They were really good. And I think I did the breed twice, and they were all good. But people asked why I chose it. And I've just talked to you about all those things, the reasons that I chose it. Now, when I look at dogs or what I want to keep back from pups, I come from this incredibly comfortable position of about 40 years of experience, and I know exactly what kind of dog I want to run that will fit with my personal character and my running style. And most people, until they've been running dogs for 20 years or so, don't get a chance to know that. When you suddenly realize you do know that you don't want a certain dog in your kennel and you recognize it as a problem that doesn't get along with you, you will be a very liberated person, I would say, because you won't keep bashing your head against the wall, blaming yourself for things going wrong with the dog. And it might not be your fault at all. It might be, but probably not. I have had lots of young dogs since then. Hazel was a great one for me. She ran at my first time I ever went to a national finals in Wyoming as a nursery dog, and had done well in the open finals after that. And then I had from her, I had Euchre and Grace, and Grace, then Euchre, and Ethel. My bitch line has stayed with me all the way through my dogs, right down from her. People talk about too, when they go to look at a litter, I've had a few questions about that, about how you can pick out one that is going to work for you. Well, of course you can't. And you are taking a chance every time you go out and buy one. You go fully armed with the knowledge of how the parents are run and raised and trained, and some idea about how that might work out for you. But I will give you the example of a bitch that I had called Euchre, who was incredibly successful. She was a former Canadian champion and just a real good dog. And everybody thought she was shy and nobody picked her, and she was left over at the end. And honestly, she wasn't shy. I don't think I've ever really raised a particularly shy dog, but on the day that somebody comes to look at them, one might be sort of tired and been playing all morning and sit in the corner and they say, don't take that one. That one's shy. And nothing could be further from the truth. So I hope that, if you buy from a reliable breeder, they're confident that they can tell you that a pup is not shy or doesn't have any kind of personality quirks when they go out at 7 or 8 weeks, whenever they go, because I don't imagine they do have them. And somebody said that recently for a litter of mine, and I just thought, she's not shy. No way. Anyway, they thought she was. I have a question here. I'll go to the question and then try and keep coming back to a few things. I will get on to a pet peeve of mine that somebody has not asked about, and that is using a round pen. I am totally against that. I think it's ridiculous. You pop a dog in with a group of scared sheep, and the dog never gets a chance to be right or get behind them and start moving the sheep in an orderly way or get any feel for them. Really, it's a place where you need to take criminals if they're going to rip your sheep apart. But even then, I don't want to have to train a criminal, so it's not going to be my kind of dog, right? But I just turn sheep and a dog loose out in a big field and try to generate order from that. Get the dog behind them, lying down, me backing up, giving room to the sheep, and let them get the feel for bringing them towards me. Bobby Henderson was here one time, and he said something funny that stuck with me for a long time. He was watching somebody running around with a dog going back and forth and around and around. He says, "You got to be able to lie him down, Amanda, or you can't learn them nothing." Anyway, I got a kick out of that. And it's true. You need to be able to lie them down. So as people are asking what you would do with young pups, I've got a young one now that's 8 weeks old. And I think I'll have taught her to lie down by the time she's 9 weeks old. She's smart. She sits already, and she comes when she's called, and she's a real smart little pup. And I'll just teach her to lie down. And I'm not saying that dogs who get out around their sheep don't go wild, because they can, their instincts go crazy, but at least they'll have some notion of what you mean when you say lie down, which is more than some of the dogs I've seen around. They haven't even taught them to lie down in the kitchen, but you may as well when you're hanging out with your dog during your play and horsing around with them and they're down, you say lie down, you get them down, and then they accept it, and it doesn't bother them very much later on. It's just a normal part of the day's routine. Lie down. Okay, no problem. My first question here is from Susan Shipton, my friend from down the highway a little bit, not very far from Kingston. She says, do I have an overall training plan of what to teach first? I teach that getting behind the sheep first and lying down. So they're not just running around, swinging in, grabbing, carrying on. Get behind the sheep and get control of them. And for a good dog, that's a profoundly satisfying step to take. They're going to love it when they realize that they can control the sheep from a distance in the background, and they don't need to cause chaos and slam into them and scatter them all over the place. And that's another reason why I like them to be out in the field. I like them to see cause and effect. That when they've made a mess, I say, look what you did. That's a mess. That's a mess out there. And it might be a mess. We have to gather them up and get going again. But soon they learn to hang on to the sheep, and they make a good job of it out in extenuating circumstances, not running around in a little fenced round pen, around and around and around and around, and maybe in the other direction. So she asked that. She says, how do you know when it's time to move on to another skill or to make things harder? When I feel that, like the young dogs are comfortable with the skill of getting behind the sheep, sometimes taking a slightly off balance flank and stopping where I ask it to, then I would guess that it might be ready to take a few driving steps, or at least to take the sheep behind me, lie down, let the sheep drift away, which is a fundamental of starting to drive. And I get driving like that. And as they get on, if they were driving real good, and I saw an opportunity where a shed came up when I had a group of 20 sheep there, I might call them through and take some sheep away. So I start shedding right away too, if I can. And it has to be that the opportunity presents itself. I don't go and try to contrive it and force a youngster to come through and go shedding. It's just happenstance. And how long do I run them for? I usually give them hopefully about 10 minutes a morning. That's all, for a month or two. And if I had time, and I work, so I often don't have time in the evening, I would give them another 10 minutes in the evening. That would take a lot of discipline from me personally, but I've been known to do it, but not that much. So I do move on and give them more challenging skills, things that will be harder, like penning. I take sheep up to the fence. I let them learn to hang on to them at the fence and exert some authority over them with no particular command, but I often give words to what they're doing. So I say, come by, away, when they're going, come by and away. And then they learn to do it on their own. And all of a sudden I go penning, and I've got dogs that are complete assistants at the pen, taking charge of the pen in a good way, in a good way. Oh, no, this next item, sorry about the cough, is from Sarah Ryder. She writes, given that most pups are chosen or assigned by 8 weeks, how can you spot the pup most likely to have natural instinct, drive, balance before they're spoken for? Many times people only see a picture or videos of pup due to distance being a barrier and hand-to-eye picking. It's just a gamble. Totally, it's a total gamble. In my last litter, I have one called Zoll. Paul Bates has one called Kingston, and John Palmer got one of them. Stacy Ramber got one. I let everybody pick their dogs, and I kept the one that was left over. I'm not unhappy with him. He's a wonderful dog. He's got funny ears, but that's the worst I can say about him. He's got a charming personality, and he looks good on his sheep, so I'm not worried about him. He's about 7 months old. He's 7 months old. There's a lot of snow on the ground, and I'm not even sure I would want to start him now if I could, if the footing was all right, which it is not. So I'll probably end up starting him in, say, April. And what I look for when I start them is I want them to have enough speed to get around my sheep, so they're not busting an ass and cutting flanks to get around them. I want them to be sort of mature between 10 months and a year, probably, hopefully. And I'm not really before then. I don't see any percentage in it. They're so young, and you can put unnecessary pressure on them. You don't need to, and they learn better when they're a little bit older. And it's certainly better if the footing is good. So I would not send a youngster that can't keep up around some sheep that are racing back to my yard and hope that he got lucky enough to be successful when he made the end of the flag. Excuse me. What else has Sarah Brader got to say here? What type of activities do you recommend until the pup is old enough to go to stock? On, off, leash, walking, recall, teaching down. The teaching down for sure, the recall for sure. After that, my pups horse around. They gallivant and play outside on the lawn, and they act like dogs. They want to act like dogs and make the scene. They play with the older dogs. They dig and they carry on. They goof around and play all the time. I shut them up if I'm not around. I put them in runs. I have runs in the winter. They go in crates during the day when I go to work. So I'm not just turning them loose in the house so they can chew the place apart. But I let them act like dogs. And then I hope that when they interact with me, they behave good. Because I'm an enforcer for sure. I also that way have a nice, I'm going to say, a conversation. Conversing with the dogs. I like that. I like them to know when I'm pissed off. I like them to know when I'm happy. And I'm just gonna grab a thing of water here. Hang on. Wait a second. Can't stop coughing. And my young dogs get to know all those things, so I'm not unhappy with them. And so Zoll doing that now. If I'm mad at him, he cows and runs downstairs. He knows he's in trouble. And my little pup, not so much. I haven't given her a hard time yet, but I might sometime soon. I don't want to keep coughing on you. Okay. And my first border collie that got me interested in herding and was keen from the beginning as a pup, I told myself with that next pup, I would start immediately, but turns out he wasn't keen until he was almost 2. Well, of course, that's very variable. Some dogs, a dog like Clive, who I started, he was a real nice dog that maybe some of you remember, for Michelle Ferraro. He didn't start till he was 18 months old, and neither did my dog Howl, who has been a total class dog all his life. When he did start, he trained up in a month. But before that, he looked like a goofy pants that everybody would have bypassed. They looked at him in early September here. A bunch of people were looking at young dogs, and he looked silly. And then in about 1 or 2 months, he didn't look silly anymore. So it just depends on the dog. And I wouldn't be impatient with one that didn't start until it was 2, particularly if I was real fond of it. If it was a nuisance around the house, or if it was aggressive or annoying in any respect, I might let it go. But probably not. I'd probably be patient and wait for it once I'd put in that amount of time. Beth McKay asks, how do you determine when a dog is ready to begin training on sheep? I think I just addressed that. The speed, if they're not fast enough, don't send them after sheep that are going to outrun them. That will teach your dog to cut flanks and corners and not get around to the balance point in an efficient way. And they'll probably do some damage on the way there, grabbing sheep and causing chaos. But if they are old enough to get around them, put on the speed and act like real athletes and be determined, then you maybe could get started. And then you just teach them left and right, lie down, walk up, and go from there. Little bits. And eventually you replace the verbal commands with whistles and take them to trials and win the trials. That's what I recommend anyway. Win the trials. Okay, when you start your dog, what are the order of the steps in the training process? For example, what needs to be taught and the order of the steps or the skills? I'm very careful about the sheep I train on too. So everybody needs to get their situation organized where their sheep are good. And when I say that, my sheep are in no way going to follow me around. And that's because I never feed them grain, which is one of the poisonous ways of ruining your sheep for your dog work. If they start following you around, there's very little that they have to bring to your dog to show him how to behave when sheep act like regular sheep. So let's just say the sheep are trotting around like this, and I flank my dog over here to the right. Before he's made any steps to the right or really executed a flank, the sheep go, here he comes to the right, let's go, and take off to the left before the dog has hardly even touched them. So you got these dogs that don't learn to finish off their flanks and take charge of their sheep because they assume that all the sheep they're going to meet are these ones that you've been training on. I would say that was maybe the biggest problem in the Northeast, was people not keeping their sheep good to train on. It's hard. And I keep a lot for that reason. I had a lot of hay this year, so I've kept back most of my yearling ewes, and I'm wintering 150. But it has optimized my dog training situation because the sheep are so good. They have a lot to show the dog. They try to get away. So even with my young dogs, I like these sheep that try to get away. So the dog goes, whoa, these sheep are going to get away. I've got to do something. And they learn to do something if they're remotely smart. And that's what you hope. We have a very smart breed, and we hope they're going to come to the job better and better. So I like it. I like it to be a bit of a free-for-all. And if I do lose them, I put leash up the young dog and send an older, more mature dog back to pick them up and take them into more neutral ground. I don't send a young dog in between the fence and the gate and try and dig them out and make a mess or leave some behind. I don't want that. I want them to learn to bring them all. So she said that training process, they get behind them. Unless I've said, I like it to be a bit of a free-for-all, and the sheep trying to get away and the young dog learning to keep them. And I give words to every step they take. I consider any swerving of the sheep like this to be a training opportunity that I can answer with giving a flank. So when the sheep veer to the right, I say away, the dog covers, and they say left, come by, and the dog covers. And I give a word to what the dog is doing quite naturally. And eventually they start doing these little marginal, careful flanks that aren't big swinging around flanks with stops, but moving along real carefully, handling their sheep left, right, and they accept it easily. Like once they start driving, they accept those inside flanks real easily, and they accept little small ones, which are what win you trials. Big swinging flanks aren't the things that win you trials. It's the little minutia, the little fine points that wins you the trials. Then I start to drive. As I say, once I've taught them that, I get them gathering, I do a lot of walking backwards, and then I start walking with them driving in eye shot, not necessarily 5 feet away. It might be 50 feet away, but I'm always walking at right angles to the dog and the sheep and making straight lines all over the place. And I've got quite a few pastures to walk into, and I try and change the terms of the driving that they do by going into a new field all the time with my handful of sheep. It's usually about 10 when I'm training a youngster. I like 10. A gal asked me a while ago about buying some sheep, and I said, well, how many do you want? Because I didn't really want to part with any of mine, but she said 6. And I said, yeah, I can sell you 6. But when I reflected on it, she's trying to get going. I told her to get 10. And not feed them any grain. And if her hay isn't good enough, you can use protein tubs. That way you're not associated with being a provider of corn and barley. Just leave the protein tub out and have them help themselves. And if she had 10, she can break them down into groups of 5 and keep them from getting so doggy so quick. And also teach your dog to shed and teach herself to shed as well. If she got to 10 sheep, she ought to be able to pull off a shed. That's what I recommended to her.
Amanda,
Yes, dear.
this is Maggie. We had a question in the question and answer section. You were talking earlier about footing, and someone asked, what do you mean by footing?
I mean ice or a foot of snow. And we had some decent footing here about a week and a half ago, but that is very unusual in January for me. I can pretty much always bank on not running dogs after Christmas. There's either too much ice on the ground, which is treacherous for the dogs. You've all heard of dogs taking severe spinal injuries. It also is treacherous for the sheep, and perhaps most important, not importantly, you too. So if you slip on that ice, you're also cooked. And I never work if it's really icy. And in this deep snow, the sheep can't get around, and there's absolutely no point in putting a young dog into sheep that can't move anywhere. And the youngster will also have trouble moving around them. No point. Wait until the footing's good. It'll come.
Thank you.
And your dog will be more mature when the footing does come. Easier to train. It'll all work out. And you don't have to feel like you're behind the 8 ball. It'll be all right. Some people go into arenas, but I feel a little bit like those are something like round pens. Not quite as bad, but they're there. I hope that has got people thinking about the order of these steps. She asked about the order of the steps and the skills. I'm also a big person for taking sheep up against the fence as a precursor to penning. Some of you who have been at my place know that I have this old-fashioned snake rail, cedar rail fencing. And what I do is I take 6 sheep, hopefully right now, my crazy yearling lambs, because they're so difficult. I love them being difficult. I take them up to the fence and they spring around like trying to get away. And the dogs have to break, give ground without gripping, hopefully. But I'm not too severe if they do grip, because they feel desperate when they've got the sheep up against the fence. And there's a lot of pressure on them. Sheep want to take off, So if they grab one, it's not the end of the world for me, especially if they don't mean to injure them. Because sometimes they're just trying to control a desperate situation, right? But anyway, they learn pretty quickly to hang on to the sheep in that corner, in their little corner, and I'm on one side, and I ask them to come on. And if I know that they're going to flank to the left or right, I might say, come, way, come, something like that. Just give words to what they're doing naturally, because if you watch the sheep, you know what the good dog is going to do. It's going to respond to where the sheep go. Anyway, I really like that. I find it helps them. It makes them feel confident, and it makes them feel confident about going in between the fence and the sheep after that, which is in itself a real good skill. And you can think of the times when you've had sheep piled up in the corner somewhere at your place and your dog goes galloping up, you send it in and you go, lie down before it gets there. And which you should never do. You should always just let it go and finish off the job if you planned them to get there in the first place. But anyway, that work against the fence really helps that out. I like it. It's one of my favorite things to do. And when the dogs are finished with it, they feel smart and like they've exerted a lot of pressure on the sheep in a good way, and it hasn't been a bad thing. And later they learn too right there to take an extra step if they need to, which is a charming trait. At some time in a dog's career, everybody's going to want their dog to take that extra step. Keep going. Come on, let's go. Okay. How do I determine what sire I would breed my bitches to? Well, I would think about my travel budget, at least. You know, one time I took a bitch over to Ricky Hutchison's dog, Jock. It was a great lark. I went trialing for the weekend and in around Bay Cup, and it was fun in Lancashire. It was a real great weekend. And I got my bitch bred and came home and had a litter of pups. My Dar is from that litter. I really like her. In the fall, I repeated a breed, which I was determined to do at some time. I was very partial to my nursery bitch this year, Tui, and I had bred her to my Dar to Randy Dye's Ross. Well, Randy Dye sold that Ross dog to Michelle Prescott Guderian in Minneapolis, St. Paul. That was awkward for me because I prefer to have bred her in the winter, but there's no way on earth I was driving to Minneapolis, St. Paul in the middle of the winter through the snow belt and the lake effect snow and so forth. Anyway, so it wasn't going to happen. And then this year I did it when I came home from the finals, which has also been slightly inconvenient because it put me in a position of raising a winter litter. Not my choice. I wouldn't have preferred to do that. It has worked out and all the pups have gone to their various homes, but it's more work than, for instance, having a litter in May, right? So I would think about that distance. I liked using the Ross dog on Dar because it was such a successful breed, not just with my bitch, but Gabby Melancon's Dot had a very, very consistent and similar temperament and work style, outrunning, real good outrunner. And I wanted to repeat it. And I would think that all of you guys, if you knew of a dog like that was so successful and smart and easy to train, you too would repeat the breed and not go adventuring to another dog just because you felt like trying something else when you had a real good result. It always worried me, for instance, that we never had more of the same way bred dog as Clive, who was sired by Star and from Mabel, who went down to Connecticut. And if I had been the person who got that bitch, I'd have brought her right back to Star because Clive was such a good dog. But anyway, that's not the way that went. But I do recommend that if you know of such a solid breed, especially a couple in the litter that showed consistent traits, go back for it. That would steer me back to that dog. So you're asking me how I would choose that sire. That would be one of the reasons. In my case, I liked the idea of the Ross dog in the first place because he was a grandson of Monty, which gave me a nice line breed to Dar, who would also be a granddaughter of Monty. I think those line breeds to real good dogs are a great idea. And I think they bring you that consistency of a breed that I have come to really, really like in these particular young ones that I'm running. This year I bred a first timer. Once again, I wouldn't have wanted to drive to Minneapolis, St. Paul and back with a dog who I had never bred to that dog before. It was a 17-hour drive there and then 17 hours back, right? So if I had a yearling bitch, no way on earth would I be taking a trip like that, not knowing if she would, number one, breed when I got there, or that she might have like 1 or 2 puppies or something, you know, if she had had a litter before, good. So this summer I did a breed to Kevin Gretton's dog, Bud. He is sired by Ricky Hutchison's Sweep, and was a nursery dog of Michael Gallagher. So I knew a bit about him before, but Kevin's been running him good. I bred to that dog and I've liked the pups. So I choose on that. I hope to see dogs in extenuating circumstances, not running around on dog broke Katahdins. That tells me nothing about the dog. I want to see them up against the wall, right? And how they react under pressure and what kind of presence they've got and self-control. I want to see those things. And I want to see a sort of elevated level of communication from that dog where it's not just run in an obedience context. I want to see them pouring onto the sheep and taking charge. You know, people say, oh, you know, so-and-so's got a great dog. Maybe so, but, you know, I would never know. And because you can't see what the dog really does because the guy's got such a severe thumb on it, you can't see them do any work. I like the dogs to be foot forward and run out in front and show us what they've got. And I know of plenty of handlers, and I'm sure you do too, that don't want you to see what their dogs have got. Okay, that's what I would say about that. So pick and choose them, but don't just choose them based on the dog in your neighborhood. Think across North America. It's not that hard to fly someplace if you've got the resources to do it. And a dog has a great pedigree that you seek. These things mean something to me. The strength of their pedigree has to mean something to you. The dogs, the dogs that are behind them is very important. Very important.
In the chat box.
Where's the chat box?
On the bottom of the screen, there's chat. I can read them.
Okay.
Kelly asks, as a beginner handler,
Yeah.
what should I be looking for in my first dog? I will be taking herding lessons and renting sheep, but I do not have my own flock yet.
You should look for very successful parents that are agreeable and cooperative, because a new handler can't handle a criminal dog. And there are criminals out there, and you've probably seen them, who, you know, are going crazy and grabbing sheep by the belly and things, and all the running breaking down into gripping fests, right? Make sure the parents don't do that. Make sure they're manageable and have a nice, sensible temperament. The temperament you can't be too careful about, because it means everything to their trainability, to the way you have to live with them. And I imagine if you're a new handler, you've probably got your dog living around in the house with you. And if it's a crazy nuisance, it is no fun to have them living in the house with you. If it's a real nice, amenable, communicable dog, that's fun. Having a nice dog is fun, but having a bad dog is a pain in the neck. And I would go and make sure that the temperament of the parents suit you, or that you know some history of the parents. I will say that a lot of trial winning, it may not be the last word in sheepdogdom, but it shows you a level of trainability that is not available if somebody's just goofing around on a farm and making claims about how good their dog is. If people have spent time with them and the dogs have responded to the training by being decent citizens and answering the calls and doing what's been asked of them, that's what we want from border collies. We want them to do what's asked of them, to join you in a strong partnership. And if they haven't got the temperament for that, it's a drag. So watch the temperament and look at the parents.
Okay, the next question from Debbie. When you mention the fence work, do you alternate between holding them in the corner and scooping them out?
Well, I don't just do it over and over again through a training routine. I usually do some driving and then take them back to the fence. And I don't do it over and over again. Then I scoop them out from the fence and drive them up the field again. So yes, I scoop them out after I've put them in, but I don't sit there for 10 or 15 minutes and keep doing it and doing it and doing it. Being successful is the charm. And then we stop it and go do something else so they don't get bored. Any other questions? Well, wait a minute. I've got some other things here. There we go. Oh, no, that was the last of my, or what traits do you look for to have a biddable partnership? How and what traits do you look for to have a buildable partnership? Wendy Warner, a buildable. It's kind of got hard to read it. It's got color in it. You know, I got real lucky a few times over the span of my career by buying a couple of good stud dogs. I had a great bitch line for years, starting with Hazel, but I bought in these two dogs. One was Stuart Davidson's Craig, who won the International in 1995. And the other was Stuart Davidson's Star, who won the International in 2002. So I had these two international dogs. It was a stroke of luck. They were beautiful dogs. But when you think of a dog and the winning it had to do to make it through to the international, so it had to be in the top 15 in its national team. It had to qualify to get to their national trials, then be in the top 15 on their national team, then run against the other top 15 from other countries and make it into the international, where there's very testing, outruns, and usually difficult sheep. You don't have to wonder if it's a decent dog. It has done all these jobs and made it through and made a great job of all those jobs. So I think when I breed to the international dog, now barring some sort of styles that don't quite suit me, I don't like dogs to be too squaring on their flanks, for instance, or off their sheep too wide. But barring that, you can be pretty sure that you are breeding into a very biddable kind of dog who took the training and went all the way. Same with winning Meeker, or some of those big trials out west where the sheep are tremendously difficult. The terrain is difficult. They're very hard trials. And once dogs are out there winning those big trials, you can bet that they're not riffraff. And I would say that the reason we have trials is so that you can identify dogs like that and settle claims about people making claims about the dogs being the best around. And we say, okay, I meet you on the trial field and we'll see whose is the best around. That's how trials got started. And that's how their merits continue, really. So I'm not averse to looking at good trial dogs, ones that have won over a span of different styles of sheep and types of sheep. Like, we don't have range ewes really in the East, but in good circumstances, we can have good North Country Cheviot somewhere. Less and less, we have more and more not so good sheep at the trials a lot of the time. But looking at those wins all across North America, you can bet that that is a buildable partnership dog. It has made it, and it has gone through rigorous training. It has risen up to a high level of communication with its handler, one way or another, whether you like it or not. And you need to learn to try to maybe identify a style of dog that suits you, what kind of person you are. But outside of that, that's where I would look. And I would look from top trial dogs, period. Anybody want to ask any more questions about that one?
I have questions on the chat now, but I have 3 more.
Okay.
Heather asks, how do you feel about puppy temperament testing?
I think it's nonsense. Sorry. I just, somebody asked me, called and asked if I temperament tested one time about 8 months ago. And I said, no, the pups are fine. And I have always had them be fine. I just don't think it's relevant. And I don't know what the point is. If you've raised a good litter of pups, they're eager to see you every time you come out to feed them. And if you talk to them a little bit and take them around outside, to me, they're well suited. And I think that temperament testing just doesn't mean anything. It's like saying, one of them was the day somebody came to look at them, somebody said, oh, that's a shy one over there. No, it's not shy. And I just think they've made a mistake. And I think temperament testing maybe falls in the same category. They just met up with the dog on a funny day, did something funny. No.
Sell a young dog on? And the second part of that, have you ever sold a dog that you regret?
If I had I've got a kind of loosely free for all, slight free for all in my house. If I have a dog that doesn't get along or is aggressive or something with other dogs in my group, like I had one who was hard on old Dory about a year ago, and I sold her on. It was a combination of reasons, but I really disliked that. Her going, Dory's 13. What's that? No. And I had been tough on the dog too, for doing it, but she just didn't really stop it. I felt like if I'd left her alone, she might have she could have had a scrap with her. That set me off. Have I ever regretted one? No, I've been proud of how they went when I sold them. Once I made up my mind to sell them. Now I'll use the example of Clive. I think he was a real good dog. But I had some younger ones. I had Monty, who was a couple of years younger, and I had Dory to run on at the same time. You're really only allowed to run a couple of dogs. I like the pedigree on Monty a little bit better, and I stuck with him. They were both sired by Stuart Davidson Star, who I imported from the UK, and they were both grandsons of that Craig dog. So the Craig and the Star, really important to a lot of the dogs that I have produced in the last 20 years. I wasn't sorry about it. I sold Corky to Terry Folsom. What a success story that's been. I am proud of dogs that have become success stories when I've sold them. I sold Susie to a gal in Vermont, Nancy Phillips. She was a wonderful dog for her for ages. And I don't mind that. I'll tell you what, the odd dog, if I get too many, it's better for me to sell them. I feel comfortable training about 3 each morning. And then I've got to come in and get dressed and go to work. If I run more than that, I'm pushing myself hard. And if I didn't have to go to work and I just came in, had a cup of coffee and could go back out, I might feel differently about the number of youngsters I bring along. But I feel like they all lose when I don't have enough time to spend with each one. And things can take a turn. So when I'm out training dogs in the morning, I try not to push any envelopes in case I have to revert and fall back to something that it's easy for the dog to do. So I don't want them to get frustrated or cause a wreck and then not be able to rectify the wreck and leave things on a positive note. So I always have to allow time for that. And it might take half an hour, but I plan for my little training sessions to take about 10 or 20 minutes per dog. And I concentrate so hard on it that I find it tiring. I'm not as young as I used to be. Just the concentration is tiring. I want a break after I've done about 3 dogs. So when I've sold them, it's usually I've rationalized what dogs I've got left to run. You're only allowed to run 2 in most trials. And what kind of, I don't know, where they might go. I think about that. And if I think they'll be successful, because I want them to be successful. And for the most part, they have. I haven't regretted selling them. Okay.
that has quite a bit of eye and is showing a lot of flappiness on heavier sheep. She also downs at the top and sometimes slow to walk up. She downs on her own. She catches their eye and then there is a standoff. Because they are heavy, she ends up too close. On lighter sheep that don't face her, she works much better. I've been trying to keep her on her feet, walking with her to help. Any other suggestions?
Well, I wouldn't run her on those heavy sheep like she is describing. I'd equip myself with some real light ones that darted around for her and obliged her a little bit more, especially if she's a nursery dog. That means she's about 1 or 2, right? She's young. And that's what I would do. I will say this, once dogs get eye, it tends to get worse. It doesn't get, hardly ever gets better. But when they can be obedient through it and get up on their feet when they're asked to do so, and flank left and right a little bit, sometimes you can keep them moving and weaving along like that. But it's not a good serious problem, and the heavy sheep absolutely will not help it. So get it some light sheep, try and get it trained, and see what it's like when it turns 3. And if it has too much eye, you might want to part company with it and let it go do a work home or something.
To start your pup.
Well, I have a certain style of running, right, where I like my dogs to come on and not to be excessively obedient. So I don't want somebody to be clamping down and squashing the joy in my dog before it gets going. I want it to feel eager and free and flamboyant about its work. Somebody mentioned that about Tui at the national finals. They said, oh my God, that dog runs with such joy. And it's true. That's what she does. She runs with joy. And I could have been slowing her down all year, but I felt like it was premature, and I would maybe put my thumb on her joy, and I don't want to do that. I want her to look as eager and free and, I don't know, forthright as she does, because it is so celebratory. So when we send these young ones out to trainers, they are often looking for a kind of a result that is a little bit canned, so they can hand you back a dog that stops, goes left, goes right, walks up. But sometimes it's not without any particular thought to the sheep at hand, or how they're relating to the sheep so much, or their way with their sheep, which I want to try to develop when I train them. So when I choose a trainer, if I did, and I have never sent a dog out to train in 40 years now, I train my own. But I recognize that I've got good timing that helps my training regimen, but I want to send them out to somebody who would train like that. I want them to think about my dog being happy and free and thinking through things, being a thoughtful dog. That means more to me than being an obedient dog. So that's how I would choose a trainer.
To finding good dogs by watching them trial.
Mhm.
How do you determine how much of the success is coming from a skilled handler and how much is innate talent in the dog?
Well, I think that as you watch more and more dogs, you'll be able to identify it. You'll be able to see that somebody stopped a dog before it caused them damage, or had a tight rein on them, because if he would let them go, there might be problems. I think people can learn to identify that. And I would say Jenny Prince could too. It is split-second timing. So you'd see somebody who jumped in and stopped their dog before all hell broke loose, but you'd also see somebody who let the dog keep coming, and the dog made a step left or right or stopped on its own without the particular assistance of the handler. You know, people say, I'm sure they've say me or Scott Glenn, they say of Howell, they say, oh well, who would know? He's run by Amanda and she's a good handler. Well, why would I run an ordinary dog? Would be one of the questions I would ask. But the other side is other people are the same. It's just that I run a sort of dog that suits me, that forward coming on sort of a dog who joins me in the job and helps out. And often you can see it at the pen, where handlers have to micromanage a dog that could cause a lot of problems, or grab one at the pen. And every step they take, they're telling the dog to stop, left, come, stop, lie down, stop, lie down, lie down. Anyway, yeah, I never do that. I always say, come on, let's go. If I have to give a flank, I consider it to be too late. And I hope the dogs are watching and they got on the job themselves and put the sheep in the pen. I mean, there can't be any question what we're doing. I open the pen gate and the sheep are there. They know they've got to go in, and I hope they're going to be a help. But sometimes when you see a handler who's really hard at the pen and handling his dog hard, you can guess that that dog's not too helpful at that job, that the handler has to put a heavy thumb down on him or put a foot in his throat. Some people say, oh, I had to run that dog with one foot on his throat. You know, anyway, a little bit like that. I hope I never have to do that. I don't want to. It's not my style. I don't want to get up in the morning and fight with a dog.
That you owned that you liked best?
Wow, I am so crazy about Dory. I'm still crazy about her. She's an incredible companion. She's not just an incredible companion. She is such a workmate. And so, I don't know. She has just given me the most memorable runs of my life. And all the little details in them, perfect. Her outrunning is always stupendous. And she just handles sheep like nothing else. I love her. And, you know, I loved Hazel too, don't get me wrong, but I wasn't a very good handler when I handled her, so it can be hard to tell. I don't know. But Dory, tops. I wish in my life I get another one like her.
Owning a top trial dog for a sire, how do you evaluate that dog on its natural talent versus the results of a really talented trainer handler? I think that's similar to an earlier question.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that.
Okay.
I confess that I'm experienced at it. And I've got a keen eye for seeing what I think dogs did and what the handlers did. And of course, often in trials, the outcome is, you know, you could win with one being a real pro, a handler being a real pro and handling a coyote kind of thing, you know. And that's and I often know the history of the dogs on their way to running later in their careers. So I can have seen them, let's just say at Soldier Hollow, grabbing sheep at somewhere when they were young, and they stopped it by the time they were 7 or 8, right? And you can be pretty sure that they were handled pretty tough. That, you know, it's not what I want, and it doesn't bother some other people, but I don't want it. I got a dog one time. It was started by Bobby Henderson, and it was I think it was Joni's, maybe, I don't know, and Kate Broadbent was mixed up in it. And I took this bitch home, and I got it home from out west, and I took it out of the sheep, and it acted like a wild Indian running around a wagon train, just around. It wouldn't stop, nothing. I couldn't get it to do anything. Finally, I'd get it stopped, but the next day, same thing. And it went on for a week. It didn't seem to remember like getting something positive out of the day before. I didn't like the way it learned. And I sent it back. And it was lucky I could send it back with Kate. I didn't like it. And to me, it was like just going out into open combat every morning, first thing in the morning. And there was no way on earth I was going to train a dog of that nature and stick with it. In fact, I don't take outside dogs in to train. And one of my fears is that I'd get one like that and have to come up with some results, because you'd have to be pretty severe to get the thing trained. And it's not my style. I don't really want it.
Stud dogs.
I have two. I've got an import by Aladoan's Cap, who is a mate to Bev Lambert's Annie and Christine Koval's True. He's been a nice dog. And then I've got Howl, who I think is a total class dog. He has made a career of being a good, solid dog, and there isn't a dirty job he won't do. I like that in a stud dog. I think everybody should want it. And then his temperament is ace. I really like him. So I've got two. Yeah.
Breeding Kelpies and Kelpie border crosses for herding. I wondered if this is a recent trend. Have you ever worked with Kelpies?
No. My father proudly told me one day, he was a cardiologist, that he knew less and less about, or he knew more and more about less and less. I'm the same. I know more and more about border collies, and I know very little about other dogs, but I cannot for the life of me see the profit in breeding a border collie to a Kelpie. It has a lack of respect for the work styles of each breed. So no, I don't condone it, and I don't think it's a good idea.
Okay, Sarah Vining asks, any thoughts on young started dogs coming into a family with kids, other than finding one that has been raised with kids?
Well, if the parents are good-natured, I don't see how it should be a problem, Sarah. People, sometimes when people bring kids around my dogs, I worry about it, because I don't deliberately not introduce them to kids. I just don't happen to have the opportunity to expose them to them. They make funny little movements and they're doing things, and I see the dogs looking at them. I say, I'm just going to put that dog away. And I wouldn't blanketly say my dogs aren't good with kids, but they're definitely not used to them. And I think they've been good once they get used to them, but you can't be too careful around somebody else's kids, can you? Huh? But I would say if they started off as little pups with those kids, I bet you they'd be fine. No problem.
Jane Kessler asks, and what would your criteria be for a started dog?
You mean if she was going to buy one, or me, or both?
It doesn't say.
Okay. Well, it would be similar to looking for a puppy. Whenever we all go over, I go over to the UK and want to get, a pup and bring it back. Well, people say and I came to think too, it was crazy. It was such a gamble, because you could buy one that was a year and a half old or started, going around at sheep and so forth, and at least know a little bit about what it might do. You'd like to see some sign that it was on its way to being a sheepdog, not just going to get home and turn into an expensive pet, right? Well, I would look at its pedigree, whether it was started or not. That would help me know a little bit about how it was going to go. And let's talk about these Aladoan Cap ones. They're very free flanking dogs left and right. I've never started a dog that has natural square flanks like that until I got Carl. That was a surprise. It was hard to get used to it, really. My dogs have never been free flankers, and I always considered it something that's slightly overrated, because the dogs that stay in contact with their sheep, to me, are more appealing than ones that cast off and get off in a tangent. And I don't really like wide flanking dogs, and I've been careful to keep him in close. But when he started off, that was a surprise. But it's something I could know about him that was likely to come from a Welsh dog like Aladone's Cap. And for instance, the Star Dog that I got from Stuart Davidson brought me quite different work. It didn't work like that. It was a little bit plainer. It worked a lot like Monty worked, for some of you who have seen him work. I would take a sharp look at the pedigree, and that I would want to know about the bitch, what it had done, who handled it, and how it handled. And that's how we got those Aladone Cap ones. I'll describe to you the process. This is a funny story. I went over and I wasn't sure who I would breed Hazel to when I got there. And Alf Kine picked me up at the airport, and he said, he said, well, who are you going to breed to? And I said, who should I breed to? Aladone's Cap or Ricky Hutchison's Jog? And he said, Ricky Hutchison's Jog. Aladone Cap is a 3-hour drive away. Well, remember, I had just flown over from Toronto with this bitch. I did think that was funny, but I said, if I liked his bitch, Alf is a serious stop and go kind of obedient kind of handler, but I felt like his bitch would reward him if he handled it looser. And I asked him that if he bred it to the Cap dog, I'd like to get a pup from it. And he bred it to the Cap pup, and a bunch of people got on the bandwagon and got them. About 5 people over here got those pups, and True and Annie and Carl were among them. So we brought 5 over at the same time, and we liked their pedigree. We all liked their pedigree. There was nothing not to like about it. Aladone's Cap has been a very successful dog, and when someone like Aladone is running around saying he thinks it's the best dog he's ever run, I stand up and take notice to that.
Like to work young ones. At what age would you taper that off, that frequency?
Well, I like to work them every day. And when you're busy with trials in May, I take them out. I take them out at every opportunity, and I make sure that I take them out daily. So first thing in the morning, I don't let anything distract me. I get some sheep off and go and train those young dogs. There's one other part of my training that I think of as completely important, and that is my lambing experience. I lamb hard with my dogs all the time. So at that time, they get to see every wild, contrary, crazy ewe trick in the book. And I often need to put a single ewe in the barn with their lamb. I teach those dogs, I help those dogs to make sure they're successful and put that crazy single in the barn. And they learn to lie in sometimes just 15 feet off and keep watch a ewe near her lambs. Yeah, I consider them a total asset in the lambing yard. And if I miss a lambing, it's very hard on my training. So Dar and Carl will be hard at the lambing. I don't need to take Howell out anymore. Now he's 12. He doesn't need to do that kind of dirty job. But my young ones, Tui, will be in the lambing yard this year, and it's a complete asset. So I think the people who miss lambing miss a complete chance to train their dogs in all the extenuating circumstances, which are extenuating things are what you're training your dog for at trials, right? You're not training them for no problems. You're training to solve the problems. You have to have them solve the problems. And the lambs show them where the problems are. And recognize a psycho bitch when it's coming your way. Handle it.
Okay, Melissa Sacchetti asks, do you have an opinion on females versus males? I have been told that males mature slower than females, but do you feel like gender makes a difference? And if so, how?
I don't think gender makes a difference. I love great bitches and I love good dogs. And yeah, they're a little bit different. You know, they've got different interests, but if they're decent dogs and there's bitches in heat, they still work through it. Behave well. Sometimes bitches can be more hormonally unpredictable, and you know, they act kind of funny just before they come in heat, and you chalk it up. You're at a trial and your dog does something insane, You say, oh, I think she's coming in heat next week. But it may or may not be true. I don't know, but it might be. And if they are in heat, they can act like fruitcakes now and again. I don't hold that against them. I like to breed bitches early. I find it gives them confidence and sets them up for having pups later in their life. And they have a different attitude to their work once they've raised a litter of pups, in my experience. And I could be wrong. I mean, just the way it's worked out for me.
Maria Amade asks, what do you look for in a young dog to see if it is ready to help with farm work that may be difficult, stock that may be uncooperative? How might you help with that introduction?
Once I get a left and right, and I've been, working along with a dog and doing a little bit of driving, I mix it up with collecting all 150 sheep once in a while, all at one time, take them through some gates. I take them across some creek bottoms, which I have here. At this time of year, those are real challenging because I've got ice all over the edges and it's hard to get across. I just mix it up. I give them tough stuff to do. If I get a really terrible ewe in my flock that is a problem over and over again to a young dog, I get rid of it. I don't want it in there. I don't want it to be a problem every day. I don't mind having a problem once a week. But if I get that sheep over and over again, it's out of there. And I don't want it clobbering dogs. But if I do have a problem, I often bring in the heavy artillery like Howell and say, come on, shift it. And I'm never too hard on dogs when they're having trouble with a ewe that are trying. And if they grip when they do that, I don't mind. I let them come on and whatever it takes for them to win. And the next time they would probably prefer not to have to get their teeth dirty. So they won't do it again, but they'll just keep walking, but they'll have the confidence to keep walking. And often just taking the extra step is all it takes. One more step, and you'll have them moved. And once they learn that, they're cool.
Our puppy before training on sheep, what are the training commands or behavior that you want to see or train?
I want pups that want to be with me and companionable, that come when they're called freely, eagerly and freely. I want them to sit, lie down when told, maybe at a distance, lie down out in the kitchen. If you had that kind of training on them, they'd be more than ready to get started on sheep in 4 months' time. But you don't need to go too crazy on a little pup. They can play around and play with their toys and stuff and other dogs and have fun. You don't need to be drilling them day and night, just a little sideline. Like I said, this pup I've got, I think she'll be lying down next week when I tell her, lie down. I give her a little piece of liver. She likes that. I give her whatever she likes. She's here to enjoy herself and hang out with me.
From the perspective of creating genetic bottlenecks via the popular sire effect, do you think there is a limit to how many litters one particular dog should sire? And if so, what is the number? 5, 10, 50?
Oh, no. Whatever people want. I think people have overused that Sheepdog, but he had 100 bitches last year. That's quite a few. So 100, suppose he had 5 pups in each litter. That's 500 pups. Percentage wise, he should be winning everything. It's not, it isn't that good. You're right. But, often bandwagons happen and people get excited about a dog and go using it. And there were lots of bitches down there and he was in places where there were lots of bitches. But I don't know. No, I don't know of any other dogs that I thought have been used too hard. I can't think of them. I haven't noticed any. That one. That's 100 is a lot by anybody's measure.
All of your dogs always seem so happy to work for you. What advice would you give to those who are training and not getting that connection?
Well, my advice is to give them the confidence to follow their instincts and reward their good instincts. Downplay their bad instincts and say no to those. But say, yes, these other things I'm going to let you do because they are so good. And thank you for doing them. And if you have an attitude like that, where you admire the good traits of your dog and disparage the ones that aren't so good, I think most dogs accept it. They like working because I'm very careful to keep their spirits high when they are working, and that they have fun. And a lot of the work is fun. They always want to be the one that's doing the work. And I'm excited about it. They're excited about it. And they get the fever. It's good. It's good. You can do it too. Keep them excited. Get them some nice sheep and don't feed them any grain. Feed them out of the tubs. And if you have grain fed them, it might be too late. Get rid of them and get some new sheep. You don't feed grain to.
Susie Bluford asks, what is your most favorite run? Which dog and why?
That's funny. I had a great run with Howell at Soldier Hollow this year. I missed a fetch, but he's very old. And he ran like a pro with an incredibly difficult pen at the end that he hung on to. I love that run, and I love that dog. He's been a great dog his entire career, but with incredibly difficult sheep, he just trotted them around, shed like a magician, and put them in the pen. I love work like that, and I love the work on really, really difficult sheep. But Dory has done as well there. She scored a 97 of 100 one day at the Soldier Hollow trials. Once again, in very difficult range use under difficult circumstances. So I don't know, sometimes, great run can bring tears to your eyes. It's very romantic. There's a romantic notion to it, right? Your dog talking to you so intimately about a little step here, left or right, pressure here, giving it up there, but knowing that it needs to come in and help out in a certain place. Those are charming, charming moments. And yeah, everybody deserves a career that affords those moments to them.
I don't know if we got away from some of the things you wanted to go on and talk about. But that's what we've got through those so far.
I'm trying to think about my pups. Susie Bluford's good at starting those pups. I've seen those pups she started. If I live near her, maybe I'd send one over there. They have fun. That's all they need to do, is have fun.
Good here.
Uh-oh. How did I do that?
What did you do?
I don't know. Are we there still?
Yeah, I see you.
Oh, okay.
Well, Genevieve just asked again, what about sending your pup for training? And you talked about that. But it's another question about sending your pup for training.
Yeah, what specifically would she like to ask about it?
She didn't say. But I can sending for a month, she said.
Oh, I think a month is a tall order. You have to expect to send a dog out for a few months if you're going to do it. The reason is they've got to get a rapport with the training person that you're sending them to. And you're not going to do that normally in 2 days. So I don't know about that. I would say at least 3 months and maybe 4. So that handler who gets it, supposing it was me, I'd have to get out there and hang out with the dog and get something going on where the dog cared if I lived or died, because they might not. And I have lost this. Join. I don't know why I haven't got it. Anyway, That's what I would say. Not a month. That won't work any more than, it takes a lot more than that. I'm sure Scott Glenn wouldn't take a dog for a month. He'd be silly to. Okay.
Worry about running and roughhousing causing pup injuries? And do males go through fear stages? I was told they do.
Fear stages. No, I haven't had a misfortune of puppy roughhousing causing problems. I have a guard dog that alarms me from time to time right now. He's a big lug. He's the only one. But all the other dogs are pretty careful. They're real careful of this puppy, surprisingly. And I'm not expecting it to get hurt. I've never had one get hurt while it was running around with the dogs, particularly. They're pretty even and they treat each other pretty well. So that doesn't bother me. What was the second part of that question? Am I worried about dog injury? And what was the next part?
The roughhousing and the fear stages.
I've never heard of fear stages. Haven't had it, and in any of my males, and they've just come along fine. I think they came along fine.
Okay, Jana asks, Amanda, you've been training for a long time. Can you talk about the times you've had to change or rethink your training methods or approaches, or learn that you headed in the wrong direction with a dog's training?
Rarely. Rarely because I seek a certain temperament of dog to train, right? But I'll give you an example of something that happened the other day, and it happened in the fall too. I have a real nice young dog. It's the last dog that Monty sired. Actually, he's died, but this was a puppy sire before he died, from my friends Mary Miner and Sandra Massey in Nevada. And her name is Carson. And for some reason, she grew absolutely stubborn about driving and taking a right flank. It happened in the fall. Well, then she had about a month off because I was away in the footing and so forth. And she did it again. And she had stopped it. So I'd taken her trialing in November and I hadn't noticed that problem come up again. Well, I hadn't run her for 6 weeks or something. And I took her out and she did the same thing. She just went, no. And I had to walk around and change where I was standing to make that work out. But I considered her in that moment to have a surprising stubborn streak. And I know she's going to get over it, but I don't know why it came up. She was flexible and it was kind of weird. It was a problem. So I'm not saying that I don't have problems when I train young dogs like that, but I'm sure I'll make sure she gets pliable again and learns to go around different things and, in different circumstances. And she would fetch and accept the right flank in the same circumstance, but when she drove in exactly the same track, no way was she going right. It was weird. But anyway, she will. And I'm not, overly concerned about it. I'm just going to ask her for small amounts of right flank because I don't want to get an open warfare with her, but she has to go right at some time. So I'll just ask her for them in increments because she did become real pliable. Late last fall, we went to a trial at Mish's, which was her first outing, and she did quite well. But anyway, that kind of thing comes up, but that's the worst of it. I hardly ever get that far along with a dog where I suddenly realize they're untrainable. After I've been working on them for 2 or 3 months, they're usually quite trainable. And I haven't had that happen. It would be more the case that I wouldn't get started with a dog because I didn't like its personality or we just didn't jive or something. That might happen.
Sharon asks, do you take your young dogs out and about to different areas?
I ski with them normally in the winter. I've been kind of sick for the last little while, so I haven't gone skiing, but that's coming shortly. I've set up the tracks. I take them out for ATV runs. And sometimes I take them in the car if I go out shopping, although that's usually the reserve of Dory. She likes to ride shotgun. I try to take them around, and if I think I have time and I'm not on too extended a trip, I'll take them on the road with me in the fall too, means I've taken them out west in my camper. So they learn to road ride. And I try not to have it be too much of a surprise. I found that while COVID was on, I was at home a lot. And it was hard on my dogs to get used to being road riders when I resumed activities this fall. I think it was hardest on Carl. I was on the road for about 6 weeks, and they never got to hang around and just act like dogs, like they do at home. You open the door, let them out, and they run around. Pretty tricky for you when you're at trials all the time and parked in a place like Meeker, and just pressure all the time. And I feel like he took it harder and harder as the time wore on. And it's understandable because he wouldn't have been used to it. He'd been at home all the time when he was young, and we never went anywhere. Okay.
Popped up. Christine asks, if you have a young dog that starts out as a gripper, a criminal, what do you do to try to solve that problem when you decide to move one on that isn't going to work out of that?
Well, you can beat a gripper because lots of people have done it, but they've been maybe more severe than you and I, Christine, might want to be with dogs. And you need to decide where in your character you want to handle such dogs. And if you don't, you could sell them to somebody who doesn't care if they handle them. But it's not going to be, it isn't going to be my cup of tea, because I don't want to have to do the stuff that would stop them from gripping, and you would have to be intervening and using things like those little flags and stuff and waving things at them and being on top of it and interrupting the action all the time because the dog's flying in for a grip. And you can't have them assaulting your sheep. It's not really the name of the game. You have to shepherd at bottom. That's what this sport is about. And you just have to decide yourself. That case of that dog that I had, I knew I didn't want to train a dog like that. No way. And it was a good decision on my part. It was good for me to recognize that it didn't suit me and it had to go. And I wasn't going to get up in the morning and duke it out with the dog with my combat boots on. No way. Anyway, there you are. All dogs are different, and they don't suit all of us.
Anybody else? Well, I don't have any more questions here. Oh, wait a minute. Wait. See, every time I say that, 2 more pop up. Maria Amade said thank you, and so did Tamara say thank you. Actually, several people have said that.
Oh,
They wanted to thank you for your time.
thank you for joining me tonight. I haven't seen a list of everybody who's on there, but I'm happy to talk to anybody anytime. And these things I'll tell you something. When I started running dogs, there was no internet. There was no searching things online and seeing, what dogs did. You had to get resourceful and learn to train dogs on your own and with a mentor. And this has been game changing, talking to people who are pros or finding out, watching all those Vimeo things of Dave Imus's. Those are instructive. And that's a great opportunity for all you folks out there. Thanks for joining me.
I do have a question here, or a couple more. Melanie asks, do you have a dog that has difficulty starting driving? Do you give them some time to figure it out, or would you move them along?
No, I give them time to figure it out, but I hardly ever have seen a dog that absolutely couldn't be taught to drive, because really all you need to do is stop it when it goes to flank left or right and turn and swerve. So usually that's a handler problem. It's not this dog, I just couldn't get it to drive. Well, maybe so, but stick with it and try to look inside yourself and see if you're making a mistake about not stopping it in the right place.
You'll appreciate this. Well, we can, but you can't. Beth Mary says, thank you. Loved your dog family in the background. You can't see them, but there's one on your bed. There's one over the corner. The puppy's been in and out. So we've been able to watch them.
Yeah, that's my dog family. All right. Yep.
Anybody else here? Okay. Wait a minute. Like somebody else is popping up here. Would you ever bother with a dog that doesn't have a natural outrun?
Johnny Wilson and I had this conversation in Texas one time. He says, what traits we asked about one another about what traits were the most important in a dog. Outrun, 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 both of us. Because without a good outrun, you can't get started. It settles ties. So if your run was neck and neck with somebody else and you lost a point or two off your outrun, you would lose the trial. Outrun, outrun, and outrun. Very, very important, and very, very important to the breeding in your prospective pup. Make sure the parents run out good. It's weighted so heavily in trials because it's so inheritable. In fact, there's a funny thing happened. Sue and I were in New Zealand and we went to a sheepdog trial. And in New Zealand, they allow you to redirect and redirect and redirect on an outrun with no penalty. In fact, you could lose 10 for a dog being a bit tight and lose nothing for redirecting it 20 times. But it has changed the character of dogs in New Zealand. It has created a breed of poor outrunners. And all of this weight, the 20-point outrun and such penalties for redirects and going wrong in the rest of the international sheepdog world has created dogs that are great outrunners. And that is one trait that you can't pop into a dog. Get a good outrunner.
Okay, just so you know, we've had 72 participants here tonight. I probably can get you a list of people who listen, and I'm sure there's others that signed up and going to listen to the recording. If there's nothing else, thank you very much, Amanda, for giving us your time. I know a lot of people have appreciated this, and this has been a good opportunity for a lot of people. So thank you very much for doing this.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you for having me.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.